Cece asked us to speak today, my first thought was, I'm not sure I have anything to say. And then she told me what the subject is, and the question is, how does God work through us? And I thought, I've been trying to figure that out most of my life. Surely I have something to say at this point. And I have to say, as I share a little of my journey into finding truth for me to that question, I have to say that I was blessed early on by being surrounded by people of faith, people who talked about God and tried to serve God. And I had one in particular who had such a personal, joyful relationship with God that she loved to talk about it and tell me wonderful stories. And when she did, she was so filled with joy that it was contagious. And even as a little child, I just couldn't wait to hear her stories, how wonderful they were. And I, as a beneficiary of many generations of Presbyterians, had experienced God differently. It was much more stern and serious. But my old friend was joyful, and I saw this relationship see her through really great challenges, and her faith sustained her. And I thought, I want some of that. And so I had that seed planted early on that I was looking for something. And I had so many questions. Like, what does God want for me to do? Why am I here? What's my mission? What's the purpose of my life? And fortunately, as I matured and I continued to ask those questions, I found that there were many, many wonderful teachers, because I came to young adulthood at a really, in many ways, a wonderful time, because there were the teachings of Gandhi, nonviolence. There was the idea of putting your body where your beliefs are. And so people began to be really active and demonstrate what they believed. And there was a truly holy man in Dr. King, who was a marvelous leader and began to lead into civil rights. And we had a president who inspired young people to give of their time and their gifts and to serve all over the world in the Peace Corps. We had leaders that we admired. And then Bobby, of course, picked up after John. And then we watched them assassinated one by one. And I have to say that it was a time of more despair than joy. I found in service, I even questioned if there was a meaning. And then, in the 60s, I came across a little book, and it was by Ram Dass, and the title was Be Here Now. It was mainly pictures. I think he was high on something when he But it awakened in me the realization of how much of my time I spent either dwelling on the past or anticipating the future, and what a small part of my time I did actually spend in the here and now. And as I became aware of that, I also read somewhere. Now, most of my teachers were not in the flesh. They were mostly through the written word. And I read somewhere that that God is not in the past or in the future, that God is only in the moment, that this creative energy of life is creating in the here and now, that life is taking form, abandoning the form it's taken, and taking new form. So I got this idea of the importance of being in the here and now, which was, I think, those were my first teachers. And then after that, I was introduced to transcendental meditation. And I came to learn that you did really have some control over your thoughts, that you could choose to be present at the moment. And that was actually really a revelation to me. That brought me into other ideas that opened me up. I think it was the artist way. They encouraged me to journal. And I found that when I journaled, I wrote things that didn't seem to come from my logical mind at all. It seemed to be much wiser than I, and surprised me sometimes. And in that journaling, one day I wrote, "What does this moment demand of me?" And that began to replace all the other questions. What does God want me to do? Where is God leading me now? And all of those what and where and why. And now the question was, what does this moment demand of me? And I found that was really a meaningful question for me. And somewhere along the line, I also read Matthew Fox, and he taught me, or brought the idea to me, that we find God not only in the via positiva, or the positive, the good that we call good in life, but we find God in the via negativa, that which is painful. And he said we find God there as well because when we sink into our pain and our suffering, we don't sink into nothingness, but we sink into a river of God. And I found that very, very comforting. So all of these things together began to change my question. And somewhere along there, I found religious science that brought it all together into one meaningful philosophy, way of life, that has certainly sustained me. But one of the big things for me then was I came to address my questions not to a God far off somewhere, but a God up close and everywhere. And that made a lot of difference. So when I asked that question, moment by moment, what does this moment demand of me? I can look at the answer and say, well, I believe that this moment demands my highest vision of good, whatever that is. And I hope that grows over time, but I can bring as much good as I can imagine and envision into that moment. And so the answer to that question, how does God work through us, became God, for me, the answer became, first the question, what does this moment demand of me? And when I respond to my highest vision of good, to that question, that's my response, then I believe God is indeed working through me, through all of us. So it's kind of where we are and what does this moment demand of us. And there we bring the best we have, our highest good. And it's really comforting to know and to believe now that that's what God requires of me. That I don't have to change the world or create some magnificent thing, but I have to live life and embrace it. And see it for the magnificent gift it is in all of its aspects. As Howard Thurman said, in all of the things that life presents, to embrace it all. And there's where I found the joy. And I have to say that now, excuse me, that now I can see God in the morning sun and the warmth and nurturance that it brings, and in the blue sky, the beauty and that feeling of eternity, the infinite. I can see God in my little dog, who brings me lots of love and thinks very highly of me. And I can also see God in the geranium that's blooming in the window, and the sometimes endless demands that those close to us place on us. And even the shock of hearing that a friend has died. I realize that God is there. And what is required of me is just to bring my highest vision into what is in the moment, what is life, what it looks like now.